country hardly known for its progressive rock and conceptual bands, Off the Edge was a breath of fresh air to the South African music scene in the early 80s. Peter Hanmer and Tony Groenewald were involved in a hard rock, an original hard rock band called Boss. And they put a couple of tracks together, demo tracks together, under the name of Off the Edge.
I think the reason for putting Off the Edge together was that Tony and I used it as a vehicle for recording all the music that we had written together in Boss. We approached a small 8-track studio in Johannesburg, and one night Tony, Wayne Edgerton, who was probably the original Boss drummer, and I went in and recorded some rough, raw demo tracks. We mixed these tracks down to 1/4-inch tape, and that was it. We had finished, we had achieved what we wanted to do.
And they gave these tracks to Chris Pryor, who was a famous radio disc jockey for Radio 5, as it was known in those days in the early 80s.
Before we knew it, we were being played on national radio. Chris then contacted Tony and I, and we had a meeting with him where he suggested that we probably should get together and look at possibly recording a full album of our original music.
The guys began recording the album in May of 1983, and it was released in December of that year on a virtually non-existent budget.
Throughout the recording of this album, we had numerous problems with drummers. Eric Lieberman, who was on loan to us from Hotline, played on the first 3 tracks, but then had to leave because of commitments with Hotline. Ingy Herbst, who originally played for Clout, joined us and played on 5 of the tracks, with the final track, which was an instrumental, played on by ex-Boss drummer Colin Heaney. This instrumental had a jazz rock feel to it, and Tony and I discussed the possibility of bringing in a keyboard player at this stage.
I was playing in a cover band called the Madison Brothers. It was a 6-piece band, very good cover band, and I had a mutual friend by the name of Mark Gathercole who knew Peter and knew me, and he would obviously be telling Peter Dave was doing this, and he'd be telling me Peter's doing this, and Peter and I hadn't met at that stage. And Mark and I went one night to see Street Talk. Peter was a member of it at that stage, and I remember being very impressed. I walked in and there was this guy playing a Fender Stratocaster through a Marshall half-stack amplifier, and the tone was as good as the playing. And later on, when I got a phone call expressing an interest in playing on the album that was being recorded, I naturally jumped at the chance.
After we heard the difference that keyboards made to this track, we immediately went back and removed some of the guitar parts that I'd put down for some of the other tracks and replaced them with keyboards as well. And it was at this stage that we realized Dave Sharp was going to become a very important member in Off the Edge.
Even though a couple of tracks from the album were given quite a fair amount of airplay and were quite popular with the jocks on Radio 5 at the time, and the enthusiasm was that the guys actually went on to release to record another couple of tracks for a mooted second album. After a while, interest started waning with the band members, and the band folded. But those 2 extra tracks can be found on a re-released or remastered copy of the first album. In 1998, Peter, the musician, got itchy feet, and he decided that he wanted to record some of the tracks from the original album using more modern methods and technology.
I also wanted to prove to myself that it was feasible to record an album in a small home studio.
And somehow his and Tony Groenewald's paths crossed once again, and they decided to put the band together at Tony's suggestion and record a second album.
After 4 to 5 songs had been recorded, Tony flew up to Joburg to add the voices. And it was here that we realized that 16 years down the road, Tony had difficulty hitting some of the high notes on those original recordings. At this point, we brought in a female singer. I met Judy Marshall while recording a music video and thought that she'd be perfect for Off the Edge. She came on audition and fitted in easily. And Tony and Judy shared vocals on the album On the Run, which we released in 1999.
To me, this was the kind of thing that I really wanted to play on the radio show that I had with Phil Wright called the Dinosaur Days, in 5FM in those days. And Phil Wright had the same attitude as what I had. He agreed with me. We felt that this was a total breath of fresh air, and we just wanted the people to hear it. It was too good not to be heard.
Tony and I had no marketing plan. We had no idea as to how we were going to sell the CDs. Brian Curran from the South African Rock Digest had heard of the album, and he contacted me to obtain a copy so that he could review it in the digest. Brian gave us a great review and then put forward the idea to put together a small off-the-edge website, probably a one-page site whereby we would at least be able to sell the CDs online, locally and overseas. This site has now grown from being a one-page website to such a huge site that Brian now maintains the site on our behalf. And the sales from that online site has been so good that Tony and I were able to finance the third Off the Edge album.
The third Off the Edge album, Just Another Band, was a natural progression of the first two albums. In fact, it was, dare I say it, even better. The guys had developed into a really professional sounding band. Peter was at the height of what he was doing. The songwriting was brilliant. Once again, the artwork was great from the album. We were playing it, the odd track on the radio, and we were getting the similar kind of response to what we were in the previous tracks.
Just Another Band took just over a year to record. Judy was now a fully fledged member of Off the Edge, and she took over vocals completely on this album. Tony played bass and piano, and I did the rest. I also included some slightly longer tracks on this album, 3 of which were instrumentals.
I'm a great fan of instrumental tracks, especially when you take into account bands like the Alan Parsons Project and bands similar to that. And Peter had done a number of instrumental tracks that were too good not to be included on the album. And then one night I was just on the way home, I bumped into an old friend of mine, Rafe Levine, who was with a rival station those days, SAFM. Rafe used to have a show during the week, weekdays, and I demanded a bit of his time, and I said to him, "You've got to hear this band. I mean, you're not going to believe how good this band actually is." And he sat in the car with me for about an hour, and I played him almost every single track from the album.
The strength of songwriting and the production on that was just kind of blew me away. And I'm not going to say it's my favorite album, because they're all my favorite albums, until I got up to the later stuff. But that was the one that really, really hooked me into Off the Edge. And the standard of guitar playing, the keyboards, the bass, the whole production technique, it was just amazing. For a South African group and the kind of sound that one is used to, it was like a whole new world.
In 2001, Peter met a lady called Sherry Jones, a lady with serious potential in the vocal stakes.
After Just Another Band was released, I was approached by a friend of mine, Bryn Jones, who asked me if I'd be interested in recording an original album with his wife Sherry.
Well, Peter and I decided to record a song for fun, and once we'd recorded it, we really liked the sound of it, and we were excited about the idea of recording an album. Although I had never recorded anything in my entire life, I'd never sung professionally, it was all very new to me.
Sherry also didn't want the album to be marketed under her own name, so we came up with a band name entitled Age of Innocence. The album was to be entitled Nowhere Land, and once again Mark got involved with the original cover design, and he also designed the logo of the band.
The album was very much sort of in the mellow candle Renaissance type mold, and it was just sort of almost like a Phil Collins Brand X type alter ego thing that Peter was doing, but without losing that typical off-the-edge feel that Peter's so well known for now.
One of the songs on this Age of Innocence album was a song entitled The Winter and the Summer, which was originally written by Dave Lambert of Straubs and covered on a Straubs album. Bryn contacted the webmaster of the Straubs website, who in turn contacted Dave Lambert to try and get permission to record the song. Dave was initially thrilled with the idea, but there were just a few small problems to be ironed out with the publisher for Dave. Once those were ironed out, we recorded the song, and after the album was released, we sent Dave a copy, and Age of Innocence now appears on the Straubs website as one of the bands who have covered a Straubs song.
Judy Marshall immigrated in late 2001, and Peter set about the task of trying to find a decent replacement for her. And he finally settled on a lady called Giselle Mynhardt, a lady with a serious vocal talent. She has her own band which she plays at various corporate gigs and stuff. And she slotted in very, very nicely into an album that ended up having 5 instrumental tracks, more than any of the other albums had in total.
And then I got a phone call out of the blue from Peter Hanmer. Oh, I got your number from John Paul DeStefano. Yeah. Well, I'd like you to come and sing on the next album. I'm looking for a vocalist. I said, but aren't you working with Judy? And Judy had left for Australia. So I had to say no and stare a good horse in the mouth. And so I came through, did a bit of singing for him. I think I gave him a CD with some of the stuff that I'd recorded covers of. He liked what he heard, gave me the first song. I worked on it for a few weeks. Came in and recorded it, and I still remember he sent me an email. So by the time I got home, this thing was in the email saying, "You're wonderful, you're in the band," and I was so excited. Off the Edge is probably one of the most interesting projects I've ever been involved with.
Unfinished Business was, I know I said it about the previous album, but it was better than the others in every single way. The songs were stronger, the artwork was once again brilliant, and I keep on going about the artwork because that is it's an important factor in what Off the Edge is all about.
The cover artwork for Unfinished Business proved to be a huge challenge for Mark. Mark had since emigrated to Australia, and this design was a long-distance collaboration between Mark and I over the overall design. The design was actually a mixture of 2D and 3D imagery, whereby the 2D part was a hand-sketched portrait of the three of us from photographs that I'd sent him. This sketched portrait was then placed in a 3D environment for the final cover.
You know, when I arrived at Peter's studio for the first time, I thought, well, where's the studio? Because he invited me into the room and there was a mic there, and I thought, well, are we having a rehearsal session? Are we not going to record today? Because you're accustomed to in all the other studios having your sound engineer and technician actually removed from you. They don't sit near you, and they don't actually hear you singing live. They hear you through all the equipment, so you sound good on the other side. And he said, no, this is it. you record and I sit here and I said, oh no, he's hearing my voice without effects. I mean, it must sound awful, because to anybody sitting outside of that little recording earphone situation, all you're hearing is this voice cracking through, and everybody can hear it. And what he came up with at the end of that first song, I couldn't believe that in a studio setup like this, he could achieve such perfection with my voice. It sounded fantastic. I don't know, it was nice to have an engineer that close, so you had that personal interaction where I could stop and not speak to him through glass and say, oh Peter, I'm not really comfortable with what I did there, can we try it again, or I need more of this in my voice when it's coming through the earphones. So a really unusual setup, and I take my hats off to him for working in such a small area and creating such spectacular results.
Once again, superlative musicianship. One of the instrumental tracks, Guiding Light, was used by Rafe Levine on SAFM as his filler track, and he's been playing it consistently ever since February of 2003.
I picked up on this track from the Off the Edge album called Unfinished Business, a song called Guiding Light. It's around about 4.5 minutes long, as far as I remember. All I did is I just hooked I edited the two pieces together, so I've now got a nice 8.5 minute long music bed if I need one. But it suited the show perfectly. It's got elements of mystery, it's got elements of rock, it's got everything that I was looking for in a music bed, and I use it 3-4 times a night in various lengths as a music bed under my voice when I'm talking about whatever feature I'm doing at the time.
And I think it's quite a compliment to Off the Edge and the effort that Peter Hanmer and the band have put into the album.
After the release of Unfinished Business, I was already looking forward to recording the new album. It was going to be our 5th. I had recently met up with Dave Sharp again and invited him to play on the album. But I did realize that with Dave coming on board, the style of music was probably going to change quite significantly, possibly become a lot harder. I discussed this with Giselle, and we both agreed that if Off the Edge were going to become a hard rock band, the band would probably be a lot better off with a male singer. And it was with a certain amount of regret that I had to say goodbye to Giselle, as we had worked so well together. And I knew that finding another singer was going to be a very tough job indeed.
As time goes by, I think we all sort of went our own ways, and by and large I've been out of the music business for quite a while. And one Friday I got a phone call from Peter, beginning of 2003 if I recall, and he was keen to know what I was up to, and we hadn't spoken for a while. And I went around to his place and he played me a couple of things, and he sort of rekindled the interest that we both had in music, and before you know it, I was once again involved in an Off the Edge album.
Tony had started a project in his own studio and was finding it quite hard to devote the kind of time needed to the recording of this album. The travelling between Cape Town and Johannesburg was also becoming a bit of an issue, and he felt it would be better if he resigned from the band at this stage. Maybe now was a good time to actually sit down and start afresh with a whole new lineup.
They'll sneak you in whenever they can, but then again I think that they don't care, 'cause after all we're just another band.
I know that Peter was looking for a male singer, and one night I was very fortunate to spot a very, very entertaining singer by the name of Clint Cunningham at a music venue called The Showcase. And Clint was the ultimate professional. He really was. He was a one-man show, although he was also playing with a band at one stage. But he was just perfect as a front man. His voice reminded me quite a bit of David Coverdale at times from Whitesnake. And I just liked his style, and I suggested to Peter to phone him. I spoke to Clint, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind if I gave his number to somebody that I knew who had a band.
Out of the blue, Peter Hanmer phones me up and he says to me, he's got this project that he's doing and he records it in his little home studio at home, and would I be interested in vocaling? And I was at a point in my life where I was welcoming all kinds of new influences and endeavors that were coming my way. And I said to him, hell yeah, that sounds great, let me come through and check it out. And I drove through to his place, completely blown away by the size of his studio, this tiny little spare bedroom in the back of his house, and wondering what kind of sound are we going to get out of this little room. And he played me the songs that he wanted me to sing. There were 2 songs, and I remember thinking, wow, fantastic production for the backing and that. And I said, hey, let's go for it, man. And my best part was I sang the song. My voice was in a good place that day, and was a great song, an easy song for me to get to grips with. And I dove in and I did it. And when we'd finished the take, Peter sort of got up and did like a Red Indian Hiawatha dance around his stool where he was sitting in front of the console, and I was wondering, what is he on about now? And he was so chuffed, and I picked up straight away with him that he was now, this is a guy I want to have in the band.
It was like a natural part of a jigsaw puzzle that had just come, the whole thing just sort of came into place. He had Dave Sharp, I'm a great Hammond fan, and I know Rafe is as well. And Dave Sharp is one of the finest Hammond players I've ever heard. And then of course there was Sherry Jones, the lady that I mentioned, who was the singer on the Age of Innocence album.
When Clint joined the band, they had already started recording, as far as I recall, and Peter had envisaged a sort of more softer kind of harmony style. He wanted a sort of lighter, he calls them airbrushed harmonies, and immediately thought of me to maybe sing for the band. And he approached me about it, and I thought it was a great idea. So I gave it a go, and when I heard how my voice complemented Clint's much stronger voice, we realized we were onto a good thing, and that's actually how I joined the band.
And this was, for me, the ideal band. This was the pinnacle of what Off the Edge was really all about.